have a new budget yet? Oh dear, there's a recommended budget now. Oh dear, a recommended budget now. Oh dear, there's a recommended budget. Now the town meeting will be held on May 5th. The tax increase will be about 7 percentage points. Tax increase about 7 percentage points. Tax increase will be about 7 percentage points if this budget's approved. 26 and a quarter will be the new mill rate. 26 and a quarter will be the new mill rate. 26 and a quarter will be the new mill rate if this budget's approved. The town meeting will approve or decrease the budget. The town meeting will approve or decrease the budget. The town meeting will approve or decrease the budget. The budget cannot be increased. Town meeting will adjourn to a town referendum. Town meeting will adjourn to a town referendum. Town meeting will adjourn to a town referendum to be scheduled with proper notice. The taxpayers will vote on the budget. The taxpayers will vote on the budget. The taxpayers will vote on the budget. Let's all get out to the polls. If the answer is yes, we'll have a new budget. The answer is yes, we'll have a new budget. The answer is yes, we'll have a new budget. Let's all get out and vote. If the vote is no, we have no new budget. If the vote is no, we have no new budget. If the vote is no, we'll have no new budget. We'll repeat the entire process. Amend the budget and back through the process. Amend the budget and back through the process. Amend the budget and back through the process to get a new budget approved. By July 1st, we must have a new budget. By July 1st, we must have a new budget. By July 1st, we must have a new budget, or the current budget will remain in effect. Taxes based on the existing budget. Taxes will be based on the existing budget. Taxes will be based on the existing budget until a new budget's approved. When the budget's approved, an additional tax bill. When the budget's approved, an additional tax bill. When the budget's approved, an additional tax bill, and a new budget will be in effect. As you know, we need more taxpayers. As you know, we need more taxpayers. As you know, we need more taxpayers to help us shoulder the load. Let's be smart and increase the tax base. So let's be smart and increase the tax base. So let's be smart and increase the tax base. We need help if we're going to keep up. Let's get the tax base raised. Hello, everybody. This is Brian O'Haron on a beautiful evening in April. I think we're expecting rain, my wife tells me, tonight and maybe tomorrow. The Poetry Festival is happening again tonight. I think it's the last night over at the college. Anybody interested in poetry, get over there and you'll see some of those 7 poets that are over there. And they do have refreshments, and the admission is free, no admission to get in. It's in the auditorium in the college in Winston. I missed a point last week. I probably should have had Shelley, Keats, Byron, or maybe even Walt Whitman up on the back of me as a friend, but I forgot about that, so I apologize. I think that would have been interesting. What I'm going to do tonight is talk about several issues. I'll make some comments first, then the notices. My notice board will be up, and we do have some notices this week. Financial updates, which will include the budget, and we do have a new budget now, as you heard me saying earlier on the introduction to the program. So the selectmen have agreed a budget to send to the town referendum on May 5th. So then we will review the selectmen meeting that happened on Monday, and we'll update the status boards. It was a very good meeting. There was a long half-hour public comment, half of which went well, half of which was a lemon. And then there was, towards the end, there was, not too long, but long enough executive session, which we didn't get to see. So the whole meeting lasted maybe 40 minutes, and it was very, very professional, very good. There were a few comments made here and there, but, nothing to be concerned about. And then once we get through that, I'll talk about meeting comments. We'll go through what happened at the meeting if I have time to do it, and get quite a lot here. And then I don't think I'll get to it this week, but I did put together. I went to the 3 meetings last week where they went over the budget. I stayed for every minute of them. It was like torture, but I did stay there, and I listened to a lot of it. Each budget got a little easier. The first one was 3 hours, the second hour and a half, and I think the third probably an hour and a half in that neighborhood. I can't remember exactly. But what I did is I did a budget balancing scoreboard. So I put down each vote that was made on the budget, who voted for what, and I have that. I don't know if I'll get that tonight. If I don't, we'll probably try to do it either next week or the week after. We got plenty of time before the referendum. I just want you to see how people voted. A lot of them were unanimous. Some weren't, and some were, but most of them were unanimous. Some pros and some cons. And they tended to go by party line most cases, not all the time. Sometimes some of the Republicans sided with the Democrats, and quite often one of the selectmen sided with the Republicans. So we're making progress here, and there's also more yes and no votes nowadays than there are abstains, which I think is wonderful. So now I'm going to talk about the comments, and what you're going to see up is the playground, the Manor Playground. And the town manager did mention on the program on Monday during his town manager's report, he mentioned that the Winston Recreation Department is calling for volunteers to work and or bring tools to the Manor Playground Community Build Day, guided by Bill Simeone, representative from the Play Pro Company. That will be on Saturday, April 19th, 2008, beginning at 9 a.m. Now, the tools that are needed are strong cordless drills, if you have a few, 1 or 2 or any, bring those. 6-foot step ladders, get up higher, I guess, around the fences and the swings and things. Rakes are needed, shovels are needed. I'm kind of surprised we in town don't have this kind of stuff, but in the recreation department, but I guess they got some, but not enough. And then many hands to contribute, as many people can help. They can go there and participate in the day, and I think they might enjoy it. So if you are interested, you can contact Alicia Corso, who's the head of the Recreation Department, at 379-8670. The Manor Playground is located between Oakdale, Glendale, Fur, F-E-H-R, I can't pronounce that too well, but F-E-H-R, I don't even know what kind of word that is, but and Palmer. So it's in that area. I guess it's somewhere up around, I've never been to it myself, but it's up around Region 7 school up there, I think. Okay, so that's kind of what's happening there, and if any of you want to participate, call 379-8670 and either talk to Alicia or leave a message for her.
The next thing I want to point out is you'll probably see a picture in back of me this week for a while. I'm going to have 2 more pictures, I hope, before the end of the program. The new town manager, Keith Robbins, is pictured again this evening, as he is to be commended for getting right down to work and minimizing the honeymoon period. You know, when people take a new job, they often say they got a honeymoon period. I've worked in companies where they said the honeymoon period will be no more than 3 months. As soon as you've been on the job 3 months, all decisions are yours and you're responsible and accountable for them. Now, I think Keith will be making plenty of decisions before that. I don't think he's going to be a victim of the 3-month rule. But he's in there now, and he's really for a guy who's only been on a job a week, started last Friday, he's really got up to speed, and he did a real good report on Monday. Short, sweet, to the point, and very productive. So get to know him. You'll see his picture. If you see him around the town hall or anywhere else in town, any of the sporting events or any of the other things going on, go up and introduce yourself. And you know, if you have any suggestions, you can privately give them to him. And there will be no repercussions for anybody if they give him some information. He might not agree with everything you want or say, and he has voiced his opinion on some things like that already. I attended the final Board of Selectmen budget balancing meeting last Friday at April 3rd. It was short in duration. David LaPointe again videotaped the session, and it may be shown on Channel 13 or on Channel 15. You can check with the Charter Communications down here on Willow Street and check with them for program times if David decides to show it. I think it's always worth seeing these programs because you can see your selectmen, the people that are handling your tax money, you can see them in person, and you can see how they think, what their priorities are, and whether you agree with them or not. I am still attending the Torrington Charter Revision Commission meetings as an observer when practical. Unfortunately, they have switched their meetings. They have 2 a month now, and they switched them to the same day that we have our charter meeting on a Tuesday. Now, and then I think the end of the month it's also on a Thursday like ours. So it's going to be tough for me to get there, but we'll get there if I can, and hopefully report back on their progress. They have a totally different set of problems down there and challenges, and they're going to be trying for November, for the election in November. Now I will move to the notices, and for the notices I think I'll use the board a little bit, but not much. The first thing I want to say is that the budget was approved by the selectmen at their meeting on Monday, at the selectmen meeting on Monday, and it was cut from the 12.5% or so that I told you last week, and then I think we brought it down to 9 something, and then I think we brought it down to 7 something. So I'm going to go over those details tonight. The final details, not the interim ones, but I'll show you what it all amounts to and how it compares to inflation and the consumer price index, which are very important. Okay, so the budget's been approved by the Board of Selectmen. It was approved 5-2. 5 selectmen, all Republicans, voted yes. 2 Democrats, the 2 Democrats voted no. That's the end of it. It's that sweet. The town meeting, by the way, on a lot of the issues, I would say probably 70–80% of them, there were unanimous votes on either additions or cuts. And then there were 20% or so where they differed, some of which were pretty big differences. But for example, the Democrats voted no on the school budget, and yes on the school budget, and the Republicans voted to cut it. So the Democrats voted not to cut it, so that's the way that went. But the majority rules, so they did cut the budget by $700,000 for the schools. Now, that we'll have to see whether they can make that cut, and then we'll have to see how it gets through the referendum. The town meeting is scheduled for May 5th, 2008, at the Gilbert School Auditorium, where they usually have that meeting. Everyone's welcome. The referendum will be scheduled from the town meeting, so we don't know when the referendum is going to be. There are some time scales in the charter. You have to have the referendum between a certain time period after the town meeting, but I don't want to get into that because it's too complex. So once they get to the town meeting, they'll tell you when they're going to have the referendum, probably a month or so later, 3 weeks to 4 weeks later, and then we will go to vote on the budget. As I said in my song, certain things can be done at the town meeting, so certain things can't be done. So we'll see what happens there, and then it'll go to town meeting. So we'll have enough time to tell you when that is. There'll be no surprises there. They have to advertise it for 30 days or so anyway, so everybody will have plenty of notice about that. It'll be in all the papers and everything. Now, the applications for the elderly and disabled tax exemption submissions are still being accepted until May 15th. We've got a long way to go on there. I'll probably drop that off next week. We've been saying it for about 5 weeks now. And you can get your applications, continue to be available from the assessor's office in the town hall. Now, there was an Aurora Estates public hearing continuation on Wednesday, April 9th. If you remember, I had a program last week where I went through all the revenue and cost objectives for Aurora Estates, which is a 300-unit development on a corner of Mountain Road and the old Route 8 down there. They did continued the public hearing last night. I went to it. It lasted till 10:30. There were some other things on before it, and that were all interesting. I stayed till the bitter end. So. Past my bedtime, and I told them that when I was there. So it will be continued, the public hearing, on Wednesday, April 9th, 2008. And at 7 o'clock, Francis P. Hicks room, most likely in the town hall. Again, anybody who wants to go is welcome to go. Now, at last night's meeting, I presented another one of my green paper, only a page and a half, maybe a page and 3/4, double-sided. I presented a green paper in support of the project. And I want to say that I'm only in support of the project if it's done responsibly. And what I decide is, in my own case, is what's done responsibly is what the town land use boards approve. All right. Now, the land use boards, as I said last week, have some very stringent rules and laws to follow, and this and that. They are human too, so we always have to be careful about that. But I gave them my 2 cents. I can't read it to you tonight. But I will show you that it's not green here because we can't show green for various technical reasons here. But this is the letter, this is the back side of it, and it basically says, let's get on with it, and let's, if it all looks well and we can solve all the problems, let's approve this development. Now, I will read this letter to you in a week or two when we have more time. But the project must be done responsibly, and that's the first thing everybody says. Well, you want it to be done, but we want it to be done responsibly. Well, everybody wants it to be done responsibly, but responsibly has many connotations and many legal definitions. We don't all know those because we're not lawyers, so we have to leave that to the lawyers and the people who do know the rules. And the people on the commissions, they've been on there various amounts of time, so some are more knowledgeable than others. They all mean well, and they all have the best interest of the town at heart. So the developer submitted some revenue and cost projections. I have a copy I can show you here. This is it, the same thing I gave you last week, except I didn't have their official one. They just handed this out last night. So what I will do is I will go over this report, and I will see how close it is to the one that I had on last week, and if there's any major differences, I'll let you know. I don't think there will be, but there might be some. So they had professionals come in and do it, the same ones that did it for the last project, and the guy was from MIT, graduate with 8 or 10 years experience, and it was very good. He did a very good report, and people seem to be satisfied with his report. Maybe not the information that's in it, but satisfied with the report. The other thing this report was prepared by Harold Michalowski Associates Inc. So they're in this planning business, so that's what they do. And the developer hires them to do the professional job. The developer also last night offered, remember last week we talked about, hey, there might be some children, some pupils in this thing. And last night he offered another option which has no children in it, or absolute minimum of children, say 5 or 10 or something, just in case. I think in the first one, for the 456 houses, they allowed 18 students, just in case there were some disabled children that had to live with their mom and dad or their grandmother or whatever. So I don't know what will happen here. I didn't read the report yet, but I will read it. I'll let you know. So that was, developer also offered a minimum pupil offer for the board to consider. From what I gather, it's a little, they can't say to the developer, we'd like you to have no children in development. I think that might be illegal. So the developer has to offer that, and then they have to consider it. And they may say, no, we want some children in there. But last week, I think I mentioned children, and I did contact both one superintendent of school and one of the people up at Gilbert. And it looks like Gilbert has lost almost 200 students over the years, over the last, say, 10, 12 years. A lot of them just over the last 3 or 4 years, maybe 100. So we have headroom at the Gilbert School. We could probably take in students without a real high overhead because we already have all the buildings and a lot of things. Now, there will be some extra money involved, but maybe not the 12,500 that we had talked about last week and they talk about in this report. Now, I haven't heard back yet from the superintendent of schools in town here, K through 8, but when I do, I'll let you know if they have any headroom. And in my green paper, I suggested to the commission that they contact the two superintendents and see if there is any headroom in there, because there's no sense talking about children coming into the school system when you don't know if you have room for them or not. And there's no point about talking about them filling the schools if indeed the schools are a quarter empty. So it's best to get the facts and deal with facts. That's how I like to operate. It's not easy to get the superintendents to go to these meetings or these people to go to the superintendent, so I've been kind of trying to broker that a little bit and bring the information there myself like a carrier pigeon. But I did ask them in the paper to contact the two superintendents and get some information there. They may not do it, but I did suggest it, and I'll be able to sleep better as a result. The public hearing has been extended until at least May 28th, 2008. The date of the next regular meeting. And then again, it may be extended again for a few days or not. I don't think they have too much time after that, maybe 5 or 6 days, but if they have to extend it for a few more days, they could probably do that for like a special meeting or something like that to get some information agreed or whatever. The Planning and Zoning Commission, Plan of Conservation and Development, POCD, that we've talked about many times in this program, was also discussed last night. There was no public hearing, but it was discussed by the Planning and Zoning Commission, and after a short discussion, the application was denied. So, and then there was a lot of talk later on in the meeting about that, and because it was an open meeting where people could make comments, and at least one of the selectmen made some comments. It's too confusing for me to understand. It's like a five-cornered hat with all kinds of interesting twists and turns. So I'm going to let them resolve all that. Define the problem and then resolve it, and then I'll try to report on it later. But I would say it's too complex to discuss here, and I don't really totally understand it myself. Things move around quite a bit, and versions change. It depends who you talk to. So now, the 8-inch water pipe that we were talking about, 12-inch water pipe going down the corridor to the Torrington Town Line, well, actually not to the Torrington Town Line yet, but to the state building on halfway down the corridor there. That's being laid now. If you drive up the corridor, you'll see them cutting the road up, and the policemen are there to make you go slow and this and that. So they're going to be laying that 8-inch pipe in. I just read in the paper today that the developer says he can live with that. He says if he can put a higher water tower or something on his property, so that shouldn't be in the way of development. And then when he goes to do his development, I guess he'll have to extend the water from the state building down to his up onto his properties. So it looks like that isn't really a problem. The Public Works and everybody else did a good job on that. There is still some concern about a few aspects that pop up in the paper. I know nothing about them, so I can't comment on them, but the town is working with their various employees to understand and make sure with the state that we don't have any liability in the future for various reasons. The Charter Revision Commission meeting was held on Tuesday, April 8th, 2008, in the P. Francis Hicks Room of the Town Hall. And the meetings during April, May, and June will be on the second Tuesday and the fourth Wednesday of each month. Okay, now I'm going to get into the interesting stuff, I'm sure you'll find, which is the financial update. The financial update, the first thing I want to point out, last time I didn't know the exact amount, but I do now. The second steep grant award was made about a week or so ago, down in, the state, and was awarded for $360,000 for the second and final phase of Green Park. So that means we have the money now for both phases, most of which comes from the state. We don't have to put in much money at all into these things, and we can get phase 1 and phase 2 done and according to the town manager, it can be done because we have all the funding up front now, and it's now been placed in the budget in the last few days. We can now, the revenue and the expense were put in the budget, we can now work on this, and we can do it kind of seamlessly. There will be some interruptions to parades and things like that while they're tearing the park apart, but it's going to be done in the shortest possible time period for all of us, and we're all thankful for that. So it'll be a year or two, and we'll have a nice shiny park down there. The other thing the town manager mentioned in his report, which we'll get to later, is that he wants to get the town people more involved in the day-to-day part of this steep grant, and I totally agree with that. You know, I'm not a big commission guy. I think the commission was useful to help get the money, but now they probably all serve their purpose, and let's let the town managers handle it. Delegate it to the town managers, and that's what the town manager wants to do with he and his direct reports and their direct reports, and I think that's the best thing that could happen. Now, of course, the commission people will still be around for advice. They may even still keep the commission going for a while. They might put a few new members on it, but I think that's going in the right direction. Thank you, town manager, for assuming that responsibility and putting that responsibility onto your own managers. Now, as far as the budget is concerned, these are new numbers, different from last week because all these budget meetings were held. The final one on Monday during the selectmen meeting. The 208-209 budget is $32,650,067, and the old budget last year, the one we're in now, 207-208, was $31,982,334. Now that's for an increase of $667,733. All this was in the newspaper. It should not be a surprise to those who read the papers. That's a 2.09% change. And don't be fooled by that. We're going to show you how much it means for taxes on another page. It's much more than that for taxes. But this is how much the budget actually went up. Unfortunately, we had some revenue that isn't there, that was there last year, and some things like that. So we have a challenge when it comes to the amount needed from taxes. The amount needed from taxes that we get from our taxpayers in 208 and 209 is $21,211,372. That's in next year's fiscal budget. That's going to the town meeting on May 5th. And in 207, 208, it was $19,801,276. That's a difference of $1,410,096. Now, if you remember what I said earlier, the difference on the last one, the budget entirety, was 667,733. So this is a bigger nut to crack for a lot of reasons, which I'll show you on the next slide. So 1,410,096, and then you divide that by 823,500, which is 1 mil nowadays. That's how much a mil is worth, 823,500, and that's a rounded off number, by the way. That's the one Henry Centrella, the finance director, uses, so I use that too. But I think when he actually does his calculations, he might use all the decimal, the other three the points. But it comes out to 1.77. If you do the math, it will be a little less than that, but I got to talk to Henry about why. I think it's the rounding here. But 1.77 mils. That's what they're going to be asking, and each mill is 823,500. Now, here's how the mills break down. I broke them down for you because I want to show you something I did here to make it easier for you to understand the difference between things we're carrying over from past referendums and past budget meetings and things that we're asking for new this year. And I want to make that very clear. If I don't get anything else done tonight, I hope I get this across to you. And if I don't, call me or send me an email, and I will work with you personally to try to understand this. Or go down to City Hall and talk to the finance director. You can do that too, or the town manager. But so, an increase in capital, the net of it all, that's after we apply any revenues that we get from the state or anywhere else. The increase in capital to us, the town taxpayers, is $236,041. And that's 0.30 mils. About a third of a mil. That has to come from the taxpayers for this budget. This is how we're breaking down the 1.77 mils. Okay, debt for the town. The town is carrying some debt here from the 206 bond issue, which not all has kicked in yet. Some more will kick in next year. But this year, a bunch of debt has kicked in. It's not all totally from the bond issue. There's a little decrease there from some school debt. But anyway, the total there is 322, 940, and that's 0.41 of a mil. So that's a little more than a third of a mil. Okay, so that's 0.41. The budget for the town is 362, 390 increase, which is 0.45 of a mil. And then the town total for all these three together are 1.16 mils. So that is what we need for that. Okay, now I go to the next page and we see debt carry forward. That's a positive because last year we paid more in debt, this year we pay less, so it shows up as a negative here. Say one year we pay 25,000, next year we pay 15, that's less 10 for that year than it was the last year, and this was happened here. It's less 15,596, which turns out to be all 0.2 of a mil. But now the thing we're including in the budget this year, besides the 2006 bond debt that we voted on before, we have no choice this year. We have to pay for it. We went to the polls and voted on it. And this is where you got to be careful about bond issues because they pop up when the work is done. Maybe 3, 4, 5 years later, 2 years later, 3 years later, and they're a big surprise when you have to start paying them. So one of the reasons we have a little higher percentage this year is because of that. Not a great deal, but here's what we're going to put in now for the Board of Education budget is 504,321.63. You add that together, and that comes out to 0.61, which equals 1.77. Right? So that's how we get to our 1.77 by adding all those together, and then we take, and there's one subtraction, which is the 15,596, and then we get 7.1 percent, 7.1%. So our budget, when we go to the referendum, we're going to be asking for a 7.1% increase in our budget for two reasons. One is what we need to do now, to make this year, and what we need to pay for past commitments we made in previous years. Now I'm going to break that down by percents for you. Of the mill rate for capital, and mostly that comes from the OCR fixes we need to do to the Pearson School. That's about 0.30 or 17% of the increase. Now, I want to point out to you that this next year will still be, it'll still be built into the budget. So let's assume everything else were equal, then we could go and do bachelor or the other school next year, and then the following third school the following year. So we would be done with those in 3 years, and we'd be doing without bonding. These are all built into the budget. And now, also, what's all figured in the budget is the revenue we will get from the state. I think they use something like 65% or something we'll get back from the state on this. The next is the debt for the town. That's mostly the 06 bond. So 2006 bond, that which we have to pay this year, there'll be more next year. That's 23% of the amount. So the next one is the town operating budget, which mostly inflation. I say here mostly inflation, 26%. That's salaries going up, say an average of 3% or something like that. That's medical insurance going up at 19% for a lot of the town employees, went up 19%. And part of the reason for that is that some of the employees have some strong medical needs, and our costs are up because the insurance companies pass that right off onto us. They don't absorb anything like that. So, and then we have the debt, which is the minus 0.02, so that's minus 2%. And then the Board of Education budget is 0.63, so that's 36%. That all up to 100% of 1.77. So if you add those up, you get 1.77, and then minus 0.66 equals 1.11 mils, or 4.54%. So what I did here was I tried to exclude for you some of this past money that we're spending this year that we already committed to in previous years. So that makes our budget increase go from or 7.10%, then it makes it look more like 4.54%. We still have to pay the 7.1 if we approve the budget, but the real money that's going to this year's expenses that wasn't committed in prior years, and even the OCR is a little tricky. I mean, we should have done that in prior years. Now we have to do it or we get fined by the state by sometime early next year. So it has to be done. So I've included that in the prior year stuff. That should have been done. And we have no choice there. So that equals 1.11 mils or 4.54% is really kind of what you're looking at. And now I'm going to give you some interesting sides. Please pay attention here. If you got your pencil, write these down. But about 1% above we're about 1% above at that 4.54%. We're about 1% above the consumer price index for all of '07. So the consumer price index was 1% below, about 3.5%. You can get these off the internet. I'll show you in a little while how you can get these kind of numbers. Okay, about 1.75% above inflation for '07. Inflation in '07 was somewhere in the neighborhood of 2.75%, and our new budget, that part of it which we need to spend this year that wasn't committed to in prior years or wasn't not committed when it should have been in prior years, is about 1.75% above the inflation for '07. Now, this year, if you look at the statistics for inflation, the first 2 months, they haven't done March yet, but the first 2 months are up around 4.25 for 1 month, I think it was January, and 4.01 to 5% for February. So inflation has gone up. And the inflation's gone up from 2.75 in 2008 here. We're starting out with 2 months of 4.25 and 4.05, and I don't know what March is going to be. It can't go down any because of the oil and all the prices of moving vegetables and fruits and around and everything else. So here we're about 0.4% above the inflation rate for January, February of '08. So, you know, we're pretty tight here. You know, this is not we're not throwing money away. And the things we have to pay for from the past, we have to pay for. The things we should have done in the past that we couldn't done, and that the state's got a gun to our head, we have to do those things. So I just want to give you the information. You have to vote your pocketbook. I can't tell you how to vote. I don't want to tell you how to vote. Everybody has individual circumstances in their life. They're in different stages of their life. And the best I can do is to try to point out to you what the data is and how it relates to inflation and the CPI. And then you have to make up your own mind. You can ask advisors. You can ask your family. You can ask anybody you want. And then you have to vote. Now, there are plenty of other people out advising you how to vote, and, you know, you can listen to their story and their case, and if you agree with them, you vote that way. If you don't, you vote some other way. But basically, the source for this data I just gave you, the inflation data, is you can get it on inflationdata.com. And if you don't have a computer, go to one of the libraries and ask them to get it, look it up for you and print it out. And I have a copy right here. This is what I got off the internet. It's got a table here of all the inflations for the past 10 years, and it shows you right here the two for this year. And these come, you know, these are all solid numbers. I'll just read while I got it here in my hand. January was 4.28% inflation, and February was 4.03, and they don't have March in here yet, but it'll be coming out pretty soon, I imagine. So that's kind of where that stands. Now, 1 mil equals a grand list of $1,000. The way you get a mil is you take the grand list, a new grand list that's computed from the reval, and you divide it by 1,000. That gives you what a mil is worth. And a mil is worth $823,500, rounded off. And there's probably a couple smaller numbers here, but he just rounds it. Henry just rounds it up to a comfortable number to work with. And then if you take the amount we need here and you divide by 823,500, then you get 1.77 mils, right? So that's where you get the 1.77 mils, and these are the new mils based upon the 823,500. And unless I made a mistake here, I don't think I have, but let me know if you see something. The new mills, after the revaluation, the mill rate, without any of these budget changes, is 24.47, as I said last week. So Well, 1 mil, the way you calculate that, the percentage is you take 1 and divide it by the mill rate, and then you get how much of a percent it is for 1 mil. So every mil is worth 4.09%. Maybe 4.8, whatever. Maybe Henry will find out I didn't use the right number there, but it's very close to 4.09%. And that's how we get our 7.10%. So we take it and we multiply 1.77 times, times that, and we get 7.10. And don't forget, for all of you who got these huge increases for reval, like I just talked to somebody the other day, 250% minus 40. So it'll probably be 210%, somewhere in that neighborhood, unless they get some relief from the town. You have to add that in, too. And anybody who got a decrease because they were less than 40% increase, then they'll get a break on their taxes, and they won't pay as much, won't actually get a decrease, but they won't have to pay as much as everybody else. So those are kind of the numbers. Talk to people about them. Any questions, ask down at City Hall. And I'm not going to put these up every week. We got until May 5th here, so maybe closer to May 5th I'll put them up again. But you have to be thinking now about what you can afford and what you want to do. But remember, the town must run as well. So we got to keep working on that. And you know my answer to that. My answer to that is get more taxpayers in town, as you heard on the song earlier, so that we can get people to help us share the load. If we get 1,000 brand new taxpayers in town, then that'll help us balance the load, and we won't feel these glitches quite as high as we have now. Matter of fact, if we had the developments in now, we wouldn't have the 1.77 increase most likely. So now, major status, we're moving along pretty much on this. I haven't really changed much on here this week because I didn't see too much, but we are starting now. We did have to produce, with the budget, we had to produce a 5-year capital plan for 5 years. I don't think it's the best plan in the world, but it's a plan, and the town manager and the selectmen and the people who work with the town can work on that plan. And I do know there's going to be a lot of work done on it this year because they want to get the fire engines organized, they want to get the police cars organized, and there's a lot of work they want to do, some of which might not fall into the capital in the long run. But now the Board of Selectmen meeting, I got about 15 minutes left. I'll kind of speed through this as best I can. Board of Selectmen meeting was very good this week. I'm not going to labor on all these things, but the reds are the ones that were policy, which they should be. The gray are just information. For example, public comment is just information. It's not policy. And then boards and commissions, where they make appointments to boards and commissions, very important because those are the people that do a lot of the running of the town, and we can't overlook their importance. The donation of property they didn't end up doing anything, but that was on there. That's policy for refunds as recommended by the tax collector. We've seen this up quite a few times. Happens almost every meeting nowadays. Fund transfer of police department, a bid waiver for the dicot for the lake. That's the poison they throw in the lake to not actually kill the milfoil, but to maim it so that it doesn't actually get to the roots, so the milfoil will grow back. And the whole milfoil thing is kind of controversial, and I'm not an expert on that, so I don't want to really go into it. But anyway, there's some money, and every year they put that into the lake, and it helps a little bit up there. Civil service police officer hire, there was some talk about that, steep committee discussion. Final budget action, that's where they actually approved the budget. They made some final changes to it and approved it. Then there was an executive session to talk about personnel union issues, not issues, but renegotiations with 3 of the major groups that work for the town. So that was discussed in private. We don't know what they said there. That's executive session, and it's not legal to talk about that outside the meeting unless people are cleared one way or the other, and I don't know what that process is. Possible action regarding the executive session, that's also policy. There wasn't any, it turns out to be. That was, that was needed to be done there. Unfinished business and new business, and again, policy red, non-policy green, and gray for informational. Now here is what happened in those. I put this in. I put these 2 blue ones on here because they're the ones only out of all the 100 or so we're dealing with over the last 4 or 5 months. There's only 2 blue ones left there. Tax deferral for elderly, that'll go on for quite a while. It's still being, going through the process. And Lambert K joint plan, we haven't heard about that in a little while. That's because they're out working on it now, and they'll come back to the town manager when they not even be working with the town manager now. He just hasn't brought it to the selectmen meeting for a while. Now, this is when we get into this meeting. They voted to approve Kristen Tazara to the Laurel City Commission. They have many people on that commission. They're all very good, and they're all very eager, and they do a good job, and everybody's proud of them. So she's now a member of that team. They also voted to approve the Commission for Persons with Disabilities, some new members, and that was James O'Connell, who was approved unanimously, Jay Case, 6-1, Selectman Perez voted against that, Joseph Beadle, who was unanimous, and Marcia Sterling, who is a very, I think, strong asset for this town, and she has a lot of good experience. She's on the school building committee. She's now on this commission. I wish she could be on 4 or 5 more, but she has a life to live too, so I don't think that's going to happen. But 6-1, Marcia, Selectman Perez against voted against that. I don't understand either of that, because both of these people are very hard workers, and they're very, I just don't understand it. Anyway, donation of Jewel Street, that got tabled. That's what the T means. The town manager is going to go out and try to find out some more information there. Vote to allow refunds, that was done unanimously, which it always is. I've never seen one that they didn't approve unanimously. Vote for a police fund transfer, that was done unanimously. Vote for the bid waiver of Dyquat, that was done unanimously. Civil Service Police was more informational. They didn't have to take any action there. They thought they were going to have to, but they didn't have to. So that wasn't, I didn't count that. Vote steep grant addition to the proposed budget. They put the cost in there and the revenue in there. So we're off and running on that, and the town's taking it over, and the commission will still be involved, helping them as they redo over the next year or two the park. Vote to add fire marshal costs. This was a campaign commitment by the Republicans that they wanted to put the fire marshal back to full-time from part-time. So the costs for that were added to the budget, and all the associated costs that have to go with it. That was not unanimous. It was 4-3. 1 Republican and 2 Democrats, Ham, Perez, and Renzullo, voted against it. Everybody else voted in favor. And then add parking attendant to proposed budget. Somebody brought that up. They wanted to put it back in. I think it was Renzullo, but there was nobody wanted to do that. I mean, none of the Republicans rescinded their vote, so they couldn't do anything there. Reduce the selectmen's salaries, brought up by Perez. It turns out that there was a question about the charter there, so they have to look into that and see if that's possible, and still might not pass, but there was no vote made on that because the charter issue came up. It says in the charter how much you pay selectmen, so they need a legal opinion on that. I don't know what the story is. Vote to reduce the proposed salary increase of the building department secretary. That was done unanimously, nothing to do with the building department secretary or her capability, just that she's in the midst of a job change, and it has to be agreed by unions and things like that. And so they want to hold off on that until they get all the things worked out, and then they'll do whatever they have to do to square that away. So that was just a technical problem they had. That was done unanimously. I think that'll be squared away once they get all the paperwork done and everybody, gets going. So she's a hard worker, does a good job, so I'm sure it'll all get squared away. Vote to reduce the proposed addition to benefits of the building department secretary, that's part of that last one I told you about. There's always 2 pieces. It's the salary, then you got to do the benefits, so it comes into 2 pieces. Vote to adopt the 208, and for some reason they do them as separate votes, and I'd do them all in one myself, but there must be some reason they can't do that. Vote to adopt the 208-09 budget. That was voted 5-2. 5 selectmen said, let's adopt it with all these cuts in it, and 7.10%, and 1.77 mils. That will go to town referendum May 5th. Perez and Renzullo voted against it. For what reason, I don't know. They don't have to say. They just voted against it. So now I must say that if this doesn't pass the referendum, there's going to be some tough cuts in this town, because they're down. You can always cut budgets, but when you cut budgets, you have to cut services. It's like cutting your food bill. If you want to reduce the food bill from $100 a week or $200 or $300, then you have to not buy some of the food. And then if you don't buy some of the food, you can't eat that food. So we have to go through that same process. It's a tough process for everybody included, and it should be done in a way. Now, a lot of suggestions were made by people in the open session at the selectmen meeting, and people who have been in this position before. It might not happen. It all depends what happens at the referendum. So the next was vote money for the, this is a small nit, the Litchfield County Board of Elected Officials meets tomorrow from 10 to 12. And if anybody wants to go to that, you can go to it, and you can hear it, sit and listen. It's in the P. Francis 6 room. I'll probably go myself. I've been to a couple. And you just listen to all these elected officials from around the county talking about their problems, and you can see there's a lot of them are in common and all that. So now I'm just going to get time here for the total discussions to date. The policy was very good this week, 14-0. Now, what I've done here is I subtracted the town manager from this column because town manager's always non-policy. He's a non-policy guy. The policy's made by the selectmen. This guy's the CEO, the administrative officer, and he doesn't make policy decisions. He brings issues to them to make policy. So basically, you got 102 to 13. And most of these 13 came in the early stages when they inherited the thing from their predecessors. So I'm really happy with this for all the selectmen. They're all doing a good job at keeping us sticking to policy. We do have a couple of the selectmen that keep wanting to drag us down to non-policy issues, but we don't get as far enough, so I have to count it into this column. Someday they probably will, but they haven't yet. Okay, the meeting, business-like, guess what? This was excellent meeting, business-like. Very good. It lasted 40 minutes. Very smooth, excellent meeting. Couple of attempts at micromanagement, which I'm not going to get into much today, but that they didn't last too long. Probably 5 minutes of the meeting was micromanagement. And I am beginning to see that the new town manager is trying to stop the micromanagement. He's not going to let people micromanage him. I can see that right now. So I don't know how he's doing it, but whatever he's doing is starting to work. Still got a little way to go yet. But we don't need a selectman telling the micromanager how to wash the windows. That doesn't make much sense. Or how to tell his people how to wash the windows. He knows how to wash the windows, and he knows how to tell his people how to wash the windows. So we don't need that. When you watch these meetings, you can see, if you listen to me enough, you'll be able to see when micromanagement appears. And we don't like micromanagement in the selectmen meetings. Okay, now I'm just going to touch a little bit on some of the meeting comments, not many because we're running out of time here. But the first thing I do want to say is that Richard Pozo, he's not the president anymore, the head of the Winston Taxpayers Association, but he did represent them there on Monday, and he made a good pitch to the selectmen and of his concerns and the Taxpayer Association's concern. You can see that repeated if they repeat that meeting. And he was very good, very lucid, and very informational, and he has had these experiences himself in the past. And I thought Richard did a good job. Sometimes he can come across like all of us, a little heavy and a little impatient and maybe a little frustrated, but this time he wasn't that way, and thank you, Richard, for taking the time. He also went to, I think, at least 2, maybe 3 of the budget balancing meetings we had last week. He didn't say much there. He did get up and speak his piece, at least one of the meetings, maybe 2, and we appreciate that. Alan DeCaro was there, and he had a lot of interesting comments to make about the budget. Not that all the selectmen would agree with him and all, but he was very good, very professional, gave well-considered comments to the selectmen, and was professional, and didn't insult anybody or anything like that. So thanks, Alan, for doing that. And then Jay Boudiazy, same thing. He went in, he made some comments, some were informational, and about sporting events happening in the next few weeks. But some of them were comments about things he'd like to see done in the budget or not done in the budget. And again, he was very professional, and it wasn't pushy, and went over very well. Now, there were also some public comments there that were, where 4 people got up that were fuming. I'm not going to go into that on this program. You can see that for yourself if you watch the selectmen meeting. But I do want to say, in defense of one of the selectmen, that he did say that if he were in the position of the developer, he would not do that, what the developer did. The developer did some things that these people didn't agree with. You can read about it in the newspapers, but the selectman did say that, it's the developer's right to do it if he wants to. It's not illegal, but he, the selectman, would not do it personally. And by the way, I wouldn't do it personally either, okay? So I operate a different way. But I'm not an investor putting $300 million into a town that perhaps doesn't want the $300 million. So you have to be able to put yourself in other people's positions, and you have to be careful. If you are trying to get something done and you think people aren't cooperating, then you have to do what you have to do, you know. So as long as it's legal, I don't think it's a real problem for us. So things will go on, and it'll all die down, and we'll get through it. The next is the budget, as we said, passed. The business portion of the meeting was very professional and brief, about 40 minutes without public comment and executive session. As a new town manager, Keith Robbins was succinct and professional in his report. And I thank you very much for that, Keith. Keep doing it. Do not allow any micromanagement. I'll be watching. An executive session was also held to discuss the contractual things. I mentioned that. Several people pointed to the boards. You saw that. Now, I do want to say that the town manager's report, I think I've got enough time to talk just quickly about that, was excellent. He talked about the progress on the Main Street enhancement phase 1, which is going to, the Leonard Engineering is working with the CONDOT of the state of Connecticut towards a 08-09 start. So you're going to be seeing the second phase, the Main Street enhancement phase 2 starting pretty quickly. And then Chuck Lee is somebody working on the Highland Lake sediment control plan. Money is available for that in this year's budget, I think. So that's being progressed. The town energy review is progressing. That's the one that Renzullo had requested, and the town manager has gotten Connecticut Light and Power or somebody to come in and do the audit. I forgot exactly who. And a vehicle list is being drafted together with the condition of each vehicle and a lifespan estimate in preparation for putting together a multi-year vehicle plan, which we need very, very badly. Okay, I talked about the playground already, and now Keith wants to discuss his goals of objectives for the next 6 months, and I thank you, Keith, for being brief here. They're going to have a special meeting, and they're going to go into that. And with that, I think I'm at the end of the program for today. I could go through more of the meeting, but it was such a good meeting. There wasn't really a lot happen there, so you're not missing anything. But anyway, I'll see you again next week, and next week I'll have more time. Maybe I'll talk a bit more about how people voted on the budget breakdowns when they were balancing the budget, and maybe not. Depends what happens over the next week. With that, I thank you very much.